What's up, YouTube? I'm Notre Dame. The OTAs have started for the Green Bay Packers as of Monday, but I'm not here to talk about the OTAs, at least not yet. I want to spend this episode catching you all up on our brand new head coach, Matt LaFleur. He's had the reins for a couple months now. I'm going to give you some insight into his history, where he came from, what we can expect. So I think it's time we pour ourselves another Packers podcast. So before we get started, I want to again thank everyone for joining and watching the video. I have reached my first goal in this long journey of YouTube. I have 100 subscribers. Hit that goal last Friday night. I was able to change my URL to youtube.com/pouranother. That was a great victory. Some of the other goals that I'm planning as we move forward, looking down the road, I do want to reach, I'm hopeful that I can reach 1,000 subscribers by the beginning of the season. So we have a couple months to work on that. And then by the end of the season, I'm hoping that I have 5,000 subscribers. And then after that, well, let's just work on these short-term goals first. But on today's episode, like I said, I did want to talk about our new coach, Matt LaFleur. I am recording this on Tuesday night, so I'm getting a little bit of snippets of what's going on as far as the OTAs and how all the players are reacting and some of the offensive installs. I'm going to save that for next week's episode. I think there's going to be a lot more to review next week, but I'm sure there's plenty of videos that you can find out there to get all of your viewing pleasure for what's going on in Packers land right now. But in regards to Matt LaFleur, I'm very excited about this head coach. I actually had a tweet going into that final weekend when he was going to be interviewed by the Green Bay Packers. I was hopeful that he would be the selection for the Green Bay Packers, that we would have the Matt LaFleur show to replace the Mike McCarthy show, and it came true. I didn't know a whole lot about him, quite frankly, a couple days leading up to that weekend interview, but everything that I had researched and done and read got me excited about what he could be and what he could bring to the offense for the Green Bay Packers. So in regards to the history or the franchise regarding the Packers and head coaches, Matt LaFleur is actually the 15th head coach in the long storied career of Green Bay, stretching back to 1921. Just for reference, if we look at some of the previous head coaches out there, you had Curly Lambeau leading the charge, coaching 334 games. Mike McCarthy coming in second at 204. Bart Starr at 131. Vince Lombardi coaching 122. Mike Holmgren coaching 112. Ray Rhodes, he coached 16 games back in 1999. That was you guys remember the Ray Rhodes show? That was just absolutely awful. Regardless, we are on our 15th head coach heading into the 2019 season. And one little statistic that I had to look up was, the average NFL coach tenure is only 4.3 years. So I think we have been lucky in regards to finding head coaches, sustaining head coaches. Definitely with McCarthy being kind of behind the reins for 13 years, 06 to 2018. We've been fortunate to have head coaches, and I'm hopeful that Matt LaFleur, at the young age of 39, will carry on the legacy and be our head coach, down the road for the long haul, let's say. So going into this coaching search, real quick, there was a lot of drama, obviously, about this head coach and what the Packers should do in regards to the drama that had transpired with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy, and who would be able to coach Aaron Rodgers going into the later end of his career as a quarterback in Green Bay. Quite frankly, no one's really talking about it now. Maybe they'll start talking about it a little bit more as the season ramps up and if there's any sort of fire between the two guys, but I don't foresee there being any issues right off the bat. Yes, Matt's 39 years old. Aaron Rodgers is 35 years old. There's a 4-year difference between them, but I like that. They're both very young guys. They're both very hungry still. You have Matt, who's hungry as a head coach to go out there and prove that he can do the job, and you have Aaron Rodgers, who's hungry to go out there and win some more Super Bowls and pat his legacy. But outside of that fact, Matt is no rookie when it comes to working around great quarterbacks. If you look at his resume, Kirk Cousins, RG3, Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, Marcus Mariota. He has surrounded himself, or he's been fortunate to coach some successful quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's been also fortunate to work under some successful coaches like Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, and obviously Sean McVay. So who is Matt LaFleur? So to dive into this, we have to go back to the beginning. Like I said, born November 14th, 1979. He grew up around football. So his dad was a head coach at Central Michigan for more than 20 years. His grandpa was also a high school football coach. His brother, because it kind of runs in the family, is a offensive assistant out in San Francisco for the 49ers right now. And as a kid, Matt spent a lot of his time attending those summer football camps that his dad would host, and he found himself gravitating more towards the quarterbacks and picking up some of that knowledge very early on. He was called up to varsity his junior year. So in his junior year, he threw for 903 yards, 7 touchdowns, and then his senior year, he completed 95 of 157 passes, passed for 1,300 yards, had 12 touchdowns his senior year. So he has some skill to play quarterback as well. He has some of that knowledge behind him to play quarterback. Outside of football, he also succeeded in basketball as a shooting guard, so he was known for his three-point shooting and lockdown defense. He was on a team that was named district champs and actually beat the Detroit County Day, who featured future NBA champion Shane Battier and David Weber, who is the younger brother of Chris Webber. So he's a little bit of a baller, shot caller. If there's anyone that will be able to take him up on any sort of basketball skills that he might have, it's probably Devontae Adams. He kind of touts that he is a baller shot caller as well. Man, I don't think I've ever sounded so white in my life. Moving on, though. So after high school, he spent 2 seasons on the bench as a walk-on at Western Michigan. They actually projected that, or not projected, they wanted him to play receiver, and he ended up transferring to Saginaw Valley after being asked to play receiver. So his head coach at Saginaw Valley was Randy Aury. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that completely right, but Aury was roommates with Tom Izzo and Steve Mariucci at Northern Michigan. So his head coach at Saginaw Valley had some kind of hookups, you could say, with also great coaches throughout college and NFL lore. Aubrey was quoted as saying, "When I met Matt, that was it. I looked at Matt and said, this is as close to the type of quarterback I was looking for. A quarterback I could give the keys to the car and say, take us for a ride. I'm telling you, if he was bigger, he'd be playing in the NFL, not coaching. That's the only difference." So he was, Matt was actually positioned to be playing the backup quarterback going into that first year at Saginaw Valley, but then the starter at the time actually sustained himself a concussion, and Matt now had the chance to kind of take the field. And once he took the field, he never looked back. Some of his highlights included leading the Cardinals to 3 consecutive NCAA Division II playoffs. He was named the team MVP in both 2001 and 2002. He ranks 3rd in school history for completions at 491 and pass attempts at 852. Ranks 4th in the school history in passing yards at 6,801 and touchdowns with 60. Some of his most memorable games, he led the Cardinals back from a 32-7 halftime deficit in the D2 playoffs. So they were down, like I said, 32-7 at halftime. He had a 55-yard touchdown to bring them within 5, and then he had a 7-yard touchdown run to cap off a 98-yard drive with 1:27 left in the game. So this guy has ice in his veins as well. So he can play quarterback, but he can also step up when the going gets rough. He also had a pretty stellar game against Mercyhurst back in 2000, where he threw for 250 yards, had a 5-touchdown game, and they ended up winning 46-40. So good college career. You know, he wasn't playing any D1 schools. He wasn't blowing up the charts like a Kyler Murray would be, but he had a respectable career, and he did pretty well. But after college, he took a graduate assistant position at Saginaw Valley in 2003, and actually played some indoor football with the Omaha Beef and the Billings Outlaws while he was getting some of that graduate assistant experience at Saginaw. Then in 2004, he reached out to his father, who, remember, used to coach for Central Michigan, and he asked his father to reach out to the new head coach at Central Michigan, to see if he could get him a position. And he was hired at Central Michigan as a graduate assistant there. And it was there where things kind of, some of the relationships and everything started to develop for Matt LaFleur, and the road became a little bit more clear as far as where he would end up, today. So in Central Michigan, he met Robert Saleh, Robert Saleh is now the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. And they were both grad assistants at Central Mission together. And 5 years later, Saleh put in a good word with Gary Kubiak, the head coach of the Houston Texans, who was searching for a quality control coach. So he made that first relationship. And I'm gonna really point out these relationships because I think this is crucial to the kind of guy and the character that Matt LaFleur is. He created that first relationship and he got himself an opportunity to go out to Houston and step into the NFL as a coach or as an assistant. So he was hired by the Houston Texans in 2008. He was an offensive assistant. He worked with both wide receivers and quarterbacks. Didn't spend, he only had 2 years out in Houston. He was kind of getting his feet wet as far as what it was like to be in the NFL. But that's where he also developed his second most important relationship, which would be with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, if you remember, is the son of Mike Shanahan, who was the head coach for the Washington Redskins. So I'm going to be covering a lot of connect the dots, if you will, for these relationships. Mike Shanahan, head coach out in Washington, and back in 2010, Kyle actually recruited Matt to come to Washington and be the quarterback's coach. So this is his first chance to actually be the sole person responsible for being in the rooms with the quarterbacks and helping them start to develop and get their techniques right and become better players in the NFL. So that particular year, Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator. Sean McVay, now the head coach in Los Angeles, was an offensive assistant, and then he transitioned to the tight ends coach. And of course, Matt LaFleur was the quarterback coach. He was actually part of the team that had rookie quarterbacks RG3, which some of you may be familiar with, and Kirk Cousins, which I hope more of you are familiar with because he plays for the rival Vikings over there in good old Minnesota. So in the 2012 season, after being the quarterback's coach for 2 years in Washington, the Redskins finished first place in the NFC East. They ended up losing to Seattle 24-14 in a wild card playoff game. And remember, that was the infamous game where RG3 ended up tearing a ligament, continued to play. Mike Shanahan took a lot of heat for having RG3 continue to play. He was hobbling all over the field. I remember that game very vividly. But regardless, that season, RG3 was named Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was elected to the Pro Bowl. And he kind of, I think if he would have not maybe injured that ligament or had some of the knee problems that he had, RG3 would still be a solid quarterback option in the NFL. Maybe not a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but a solid option as far as a quarterback in the NFL. In 2014, Matt LaFleur left the NFL and actually went back to college football for a season where he was the quarterback's trainer at the University of Notre Dame. He guided quarterback Everett Golson to 3,445 passing yards and 29 touchdowns, so I think that's a pretty respectable season for a college quarterback. And then a little fun fact for you, it was coincidentally the same season that Deshaun Kaiser was a redshirt freshman, who of course is a backup quarterback in Green Bay. So it's a small world after all, is what they say. Fast forward to February 5th, 2015, and Matt LaFleur takes a quarterback's coach position for the Atlanta Falcons. So at that time, Kyle Shanahan now was the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, and Matt's younger brother, Mike, was also an offensive assistant with Atlanta at the same time. So you kind of had two brothers working on the same team. And this is really where I think a lot of the resume starts to just explode for what Matt LaFleur can do with a talented quarterback under his belt. So in 2 years as the quarterback coach, Matt Ryan ranked number 2 in passer rating at 102.1, number 2 in passing yards with a little over 9,500. Number 4 in completion percentage with 67.9. Number 5 in completions. Number 8 in touchdowns. So Matt Ryan really kind of just exploded around that same time. Whether it's a coincidence or not, he had an incredible string of years there with Matt LaFleur as the quarterback coach. In 2016, Matt LaFleur coached Matt Ryan during the MVP season, and Ryan that season threw for 4,900 yards. He had the highest passing yardage in team history. He had 38 touchdowns. He led the league with a 117.1 quarterback rating, which is the 5th highest mark in league history. So think about that for a second. The 5th highest ranking in NFL history. Of course, if we remember as Packer fans, that was the year that the Atlanta Falcons beat Green Bay in the NFC Championship game. They absolutely destroyed us, 44-21. They ended up going on to the Super Bowl for only the second time in franchise history. And of course, They had that stinker of a loss to New England. I don't use the word stinker very often, but they had that embarrassing lead that evaporated from them. And of course, New England went on to win a Super Bowl. Now, I'm going to go a little bit off script right now and just talk about how close the Packers have come to making their way to the Super Bowl. I actually caught the 2014 NFC Championship game against the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday. I don't know why I forced myself to rewatch that, but they absolutely dominated that game. They should have beat Seattle. We all know how it ended. The Packers were 12-4 that season. Rodgers was named league MVP that season. There's no reason why we shouldn't have faced New England that year. And then we look at the Atlanta game in 2016 NFC Championship. And yeah, we got our asses handed to us. But remember, that was the 10-6 season that we had where we ran the table and we probably weren't even supposed to be in the playoffs. So I can forgive that time. But there should be a lot more Rodgers, Brady's Super Bowls than the ones that we have never had the chance to experience. All right, let's just move on. So after 2 seasons in Atlanta, Matt LaFleur was then hired out in Los Angeles to be the offensive coordinator. So he has officially jumped up another rank, going from offensive assistant to quarterbacks coach to now offensive coordinator. And he worked with good old Sean McVay, who he originally built that relationship with back in Washington. Sean McVay was still calling the plays as the offensive coordinator, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But as we dive into the statistics and what the Rams offense was able to do year over year by adding Matt LaFleur to the staff, they went from a 4-12 record in 2016 to an 11-5 record in 2017. They led the NFL in 2017 with 29.8 points per game, which was an improvement of 14 points per game from 2016. That's the first team in Super Bowl era to go from last to first in the NFL in scoring in one season. Jared Goff passer rating went up 37 points from 16 to 17 at 63.6, all the way up to 100.5. And no offense threw less interceptions in the entire league with a whopping 7. And that's even beating Aaron Rodgers in his impeccable way of making sure that he doesn't turn over the ball. Outside of the passing game, Todd Gurley was named Associated Press Offensive Player of the Year and had 2,093 scrimmage yards. So it was an absolute explosion in Los Angeles. Again, was it a coincidence or was it not a coincidence? But with Matt LaFleur on the offense and helping kind of coordinate that with Sean McVay. So in January 30th of 2018, Tennessee gets an opening for the offensive coordinator position. Now, Matt has only had 1 year of that kind of position knowledge under his belt, but like I said earlier, McVay was still calling the plays out in Los Angeles, and McVay knew that this was a chance to have Matt get some of that play calling knowledge that he so desperately thrived for, and he let Matt LaFleur go, which is completely respectable. If Matt would not have been allowed to go to the Tennessee Titans and call plays for that year, I don't think that he would have been a strong candidate or had the experience needed to be considered for the Packers head coaching position. So we look at the Tennessee Titans offense from last season, and there can be an area of concern for what maybe we can expect as Matt LaFleur as a play caller. Now, the offense ranked 25th in the NFL, but they were number 7 in rushing. And things to keep in mind with their offense last season: Mariota struggled with a nerve injury in the season opener, but yet he still set a franchise single-season record for completion percentage. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit too, about this whole completion percentage statistic that I think is going to benefit the Packers moving forward. Top tight end Delaney Walker and Jonnu Smith had season-ending injuries as well. But running back Derrick Henry became a fantasy football stud in the final 5 games of the NFL season. In those games, he rushed for 624 yards and had 8 touchdowns. The Titans did win 4 of their last 5 remaining games, but did fall that 1 game short of reaching the playoffs. But that was actually a really big blessing in disguise for the Packers, because had the Tennessee Titans gone on and into the playoffs, they wouldn't have had that opportunity to coach Matt LaFleur, because he probably would have been, sidetracked and busy and distracted by some of the playoff preparation that needed to happen. So let's talk about the interview process real quick. So it was a quick interview turnaround. I think it really only was a span of about a week and a half to 2 weeks that the Packers spent interviewing coaches. Obviously, Josh McDaniels out in New England, if you remember, was a huge prospect. They felt like he had the chance to come in and be able to coach Aaron Rodgers, because like I said at the beginning of the video, there's a lot of concern about that. But they had this leadership council in Green Bay that comprised of Mark Murphy, Gutekunst, Russ Ball, and some Packer players on what they wanted out of their next head coach and how to interview and get all the various opinions of who to hire. So they interviewed 10 candidates in total, with 5 scheduled going into that final weekend. And like I said, I had that tweet before. I won't boast anymore long about that. So Mark Murphy was actually quoted saying at the announcement of when they hired Matt LaFleur that he was the most prepared candidate out of everyone that showed up. And it turned into a candid conversation, just speaking with Matt LaFleur. And this, again, kind of gives me chills a little bit, but this goes back to that whole relationship aspect that I really want to boil down and make evident to everyone watching the video. Matt, from everything that I've read and watched in the last couple months, is a people person that just knows how to work with people and create a culture and has that leadership. And he has a lot to prove. He's the first-time head coach. He has done nothing but proven that he is capable at every other position that he has worked at before, and he's extremely hungry. And the most important thing that we can't forget is that Matt LaFleur has done it the right way. In a span of 10 years, he went from an offensive assistant in Houston to the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, and that is completely unheard of, regardless of whether it's the NBA, NHL, or NFL. He worked hard, he continued to get better, and he didn't step on anyone as he continued to climb that ladder to get to where he is. And again, back to relationships. He did it through building trust and friendship with other people in NFL to get to where he is. And outside of those relationships that he has built, he talks a lot about how family is very important to him. And a lot of that also boils down to how he wants to create the culture in Green Bay. He wants to create a family feeling in Green Bay. He does music during practices, which Mike McCarthy never did throughout his tenure as the head coach. He has built a young staff around him that also is hungry and wants to succeed and prove themselves. He has a young team, obviously, because they always draft and grow that way. And the culture that I'm starting to see in Green Bay is absolutely phenomenal, and it gets me really excited for where this team can go down the road. But if looking at the history of Matt LaFleur has shown me anything, it's that he has that leadership mentality that you want out of a head coach. And outside of sports and music and some of my other passions that I've talked about on this show or in my intro video, in this Packers podcast, leadership is a very huge passion of mine as well. I think the world needs obviously more leaders, and when you're talking about sports in general, you have to give respect to gain respect, and it always starts from the top down. And I think that's something that he has kind of ingrained in him to be very successful as the Packers head coach. Now, talking about the offensive system and what we can expect from Matt LaFleur, they're going to be a zone running scheme. Now, the run game is going to be extremely important for the Green Bay Packers. So if you are Aaron Jones or Dexter Williams or Jamal Williams, you have to absolutely be salivating at the idea of having Matt LaFleur as your head coach. They're going to be working a lot on that play action. And when we talk about completion percentages that previous quarterbacks have had while being under that Matt LaFleur kind of an offense, this is going to be perfect for an Aaron Rodgers type of situation. I think we can all agree, especially if you're as passionate about football as I am, but you watch so many NFL games and wide receivers are getting wide open, and then you watch the Packers game and you just completely scratch your head on why none of these guys can get open and catch the ball. I think what Matt is going to bring, and I'm hoping that he can bring the team, is an offense with wide receivers like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Jamon Moore, Equanimeous St. Brown, that you don't need an Antonio Brown or some roster of stud receivers to be successful, because you have Aaron Rodgers who can throw the ball anywhere, and you just need to get your guys open and they just need to catch the ball. And I think Matt is going to be able to create that kind of an offense with the Packers. Outside of the zone running scheme, they talk about an illusion of complexity. So what this essentially means is that they're going to have very similar formations that they will show the defense, but they're going to have multiple different play options that they can take from that. Now, stemming off from that a little bit is talking about how Rodgers is going to have a little less autonomy to go out and make audibles like he did in Mike McCarthy's kind of game plan and Mike McCarthy's offense. They talk a lot about can plays, and what that means is that Rodgers will have options when he is under center for a can play where he can change it up or audible, but not every single play is going to have that. So he's going to kind of bring back the reins a little bit on Rodgers and control essentially what's going on behind that offense. This could completely backfire on him, especially with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who is a veteran coming into his 11th, 12th season as a starting quarterback in the NFL. This could backfire and explode in his face, but I think what this will allow to happen is to have someone like LaFleur be more in charge of what is going on the offensive side of the ball. And if things go great, Aaron Rodgers is going to be completely on board with it. And if things go sour, well, we're all just going to be drinking away our sorrows. But I personally don't think any of that's going to happen. I do think Matt LaFleur is going to be a great coach. I should probably have a counter of how many times I've said his name throughout this video and how high praise I have for him. There's a lot of concern about whether or not LaFleur will kind of squander away Rodgers' later years of his career, but I think the dichotomy between him and Rodgers is going to grow and develop and blossom into a beautiful thing. I love that they are both young, like I've said before. I love that they both have hunger, whether you're a veteran in the league or coming in as your first time as a head coach. I think being young will create a lot more relatability between the two of them. I think once that relationship grows, they'll be able to get creative together, and I think Rodgers will actually develop more of a voice with LaFleur as the head coach versus Mike McCarthy as the head coach, because these guys are very similar, the same generation. I mean, heck, LaFleur has a Twitter account, which was something that Mike McCarthy probably didn't even know existed or was a thing unless somebody was getting suspended or something, which never happened in Green Bay. So at the end of the day, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think you can tell that I am very excited about Matt LaFleur. I think only time will tell down the road, maybe a season or two, whether or not he will be the type of head coach that we need in Green Bay. But everything that I see from his history, everything that I have studied over the last couple days tells me wholeheartedly that they found a guy with great character, hard work ethic, leadership, knowledge, and I got to be excited about what they have at a head coach position. Thank you as always for watching the video. If you could, I had a lot of Facebook likes this week. I'm not sure all of you know that you can subscribe to these YouTube videos. So down below, hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything, but it does mean the world to me. Down the bottom, you can comment. Let me know what you think of the head coach if you'd like to, if he's someone that you feel makes a great pick or great option for Green Bay. And next week, again, I will start to cover some of the OTAs. We got some Packer news, and then it gets really quiet again after that as we wait for training camp to start. But as always, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching.